Have you ever wondered why you care so much about what others think of you? That weight you carry, constantly measuring your actions and words in the hopes of gaining approval, doesn't just hold you back from living more freely. It also sabotages your own potential. The truth is, most people don't care as much as you think they do. And here's the controversial part. The only reason you're still trapped in this need for external validation is because you've chosen to be. The good news? You can stop. Instead of living to please others, you can finally start making choices that truly reflect who you are. And that starts right now. Get ready to discover how to break free from the cycle of self-criticism, embrace your authenticity, and unleash the energy that's been consumed by the fear of judgment. It's simpler than it seems, and the results could completely transform the way you see the world. Have you ever doubted your ability to complete a task or reach a goal, even when you knew you had the skills to do it? This phenomenon is more common than you might think, and it's known as imposter syndrome. First studied by Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes in 1978, imposter syndrome affects highly competent people who constantly feel on the verge of being exposed as frauds. Despite clear evidence of success, the fear of judgment makes them believe their worth is far less than it actually is. This holds many people back from reaching their full potential, as fierce self-criticism and fear of failure paralyze them from taking action. What's interesting is that this constant feeling of being judged has deep roots. Studies show that, from an evolutionary perspective, humans are wired to care about what others think. A study from Stanford University revealed that our brain responds to social judgment in the same way it reacts to physical threats, releasing cortisol, the stress hormone. This means the fear of judgment is literally embedded in our biology. When we feel judged, we often act defensively or hesitate to make important decisions, creating a cycle of inaction. The fear of rejection is an instinct deeply rooted in our biology. We evolved in small tribes, where being excluded could mean death, since we depended on the community for survival. This fear, which was once vital, now shows up in a mismatched way. Social rejection in today's world no longer poses a physical threat, yet our brains still respond as if it does. A study from the University of Michigan showed that the emotional pain of rejection activates the same areas of the brain as physical pain. It's no wonder then that so many people avoid taking risks or putting themselves out there due to the fear of judgment. This instinct for self-preservation, while understandable, has become one of the biggest obstacles to personal growth. The fear of being kicked out of the group often stops people from expressing their true opinions or taking initiatives that could lead to great achievements. In practice, you might notice this in your daily life when you avoid giving honest feedback or hesitate to take on a leadership role. But the reality is, in today's world, the diversity of opinions and the multitude of social groups make this fear outdated. What we need now is to train our minds to recognize that the risk of rejection no longer carries the same consequences. Overcoming this fear requires gradual exposure. Modern psychology suggests that by exposing yourself to small, uncomfortable situations, you can train your brain to handle rejection better. For instance, starting by expressing your ideas in smaller circles or more comfortable settings can be a good first step. Studies like those by William James show that emotional resilience is built progressively, and with continuous practice, the intensity of this fear decreases. And when we talk about modern challenges, social media is one of the biggest amplifiers of this fear today. The good news is that you can reverse this process. One practical way to combat this fear is to begin gradually exposing yourself to situations that make you uncomfortable. Research in psychology, like the study conducted by Albert Bandura, suggests that self-efficacy, the belief in your ability to complete tasks, increases with small victories. In other words, by facing and overcoming smaller challenges, you build the confidence needed to tackle more complex situations. If you start today, give yourself credit for what you've already achieved and recognize that the fear of judgment is natural but it shouldn't be the factor that dictates your choices. This will be crucial when we talk about external obstacles like the crab bucket effect. Many of us have experienced the crab bucket effect at some point in our lives, maybe without even realizing it. The metaphor is simple. When one crab tries to climb out of the bucket, the others pull it back down. This mirrors human behavior in many social situations, where those who seek growth or try something different end up being discouraged or criticized by others. This phenomenon has been widely studied in social psychology and is known as the pressure to conform. According to psychologist Solomon Asch, social conformity can lead people to abandon their own opinions or desires just to fit in with the group, even when they believe they're right. This dynamic is more common than you might think. Imagine a situation where you wanted to change careers, start a business, or adopt a new lifestyle, and those closest to you said it was too risky, that it wouldn't work, or that it's better not to take the chance. Studies show that this negative reaction often doesn't come from malice, but from the fear others have of being left behind. Human beings have a natural tendency towards stability, and any change can be perceived as a threat. This happens even in family or work environments, where the drive to maintain the status quo is stronger than the push for progress. But here's the thing, you need to be clear about your purpose and your goals, or you'll end up being pulled back to the bottom of the bucket. A practical strategy is to surround yourself with people who encourage your growth. Instead of wasting energy trying to prove yourself to those who don't believe in you, seek out those who have already walked the path you want to follow. As we've seen in studies on support networks like Mark Granovetter's work, people with weak ties but aligned goals are often sources of new opportunities and perspectives. Social media is a prime example of this effect, taking exposure and comparison to a level our ancestors could never have imagined. Today, we're constantly bombarded with images of perfect lives, leading us to unfairly compare ourselves to others. A study from a Harvard University revealed that excessive use of social media is directly linked to increased feelings of inadequacy and low self-esteem. Why? Because what we see online is, more often than not, an edited version of reality, but our brains process these images as if they were the standard. This creates a cycle of seeking validation, where the instant gratification, those likes and comments, becomes a constant source of dopamine, creating a kind of addiction. The problem is that this cheap dopamine weakens our ability to pursue long-term gratification. By focusing so much on quick rewards from social media, we end up neglecting bigger projects that require patience and resilience. Psychologist Sherry Turkle warns, in her research, about how this constant search for virtual approval is eroding our ability to maintain deep and authentic connections. She suggests that instead of being truly connected, we're just keeping up with superficial interactions that don't fulfill us in a meaningful way. And this directly affects our motivation, as we become more concerned with looking good than actually feeling good. If you feel trapped in this cycle of comparison, one practical step is to start limiting your social media usage. On top of that, replace some of that time with activities that foster real growth, like learning something new or investing in more authentic relationships. A helpful tip is to follow accounts that inspire you to grow, rather than bringing you down. When you start replacing this addiction with habits that bring more substantial rewards, your mind becomes more focused and healthier. Now let's move forward to how we can tackle fear and shyness more directly, by exploring exposure therapy. Facing the fear of judgment and overcoming shyness isn't easy, but the good news is there's an effective technique for it: exposure therapy. Essentially, it involves gradually exposing yourself to situations that trigger anxiety, allowing your brain to adjust and eventually reduce the sense of threat. Research by Joseph Wolpe, one of the pioneers of behavioral therapy, showed that controlled exposure to fears can significantly help in treating phobias and social anxieties. When it comes to shyness, it can be something as simple as starting a conversation with a stranger or speaking in front of a small group. I've been through this process myself. In the beginning, the fear of judgment was so paralyzing that it stopped me from sharing my ideas. But over time, I began exposing myself to smaller challenges like presenting projects in small meetings, until I reached the point where I felt comfortable speaking to large audiences. What's interesting is that the more you expose yourself, the more you realize that the fear was bigger in your mind than in reality. The truth is, most people are so focused on their own problems that they don't have the time to judge you with the intensity we imagine. We can't ignore the impact a clear purpose can have on overcoming adversity. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote in his famous book, Man's Search for Meaning, that those who had a strong sense of purpose were the ones who managed to survive even the most extreme conditions. He famously said, "He who has a why can bear almost any how." This phrase encapsulates the idea that when we are connected to something bigger than ourselves, we develop an inner strength that allows us to face challenges that would otherwise seem insurmountable. Having a purpose also provides direction. Think about the difference between someone who is just going through the motions of life and someone who is living with a clear purpose. When challenges arise, the person without purpose might easily give up, while the one who has an ikigai, a Japanese word meaning reason for being, finds a way to keep going, even in the toughest situations. A study from the University of California showed that people with a strong sense of purpose in life have higher levels of well-being and mental health, especially in times of crisis. If you haven't discovered your purpose yet, there's no need to panic. The journey to finding it can start with something simple. Reflecting on what you enjoy doing and how that can positively impact the lives of others. This alignment between what you love and what the world needs is where purpose begins to take root. From there, resilience becomes a natural byproduct. And it's this very resilience that will help you deal with difficulties and stay motivated. Which brings us to our next point about dopamine, motivation, and the importance of taking action. Dopamine, often associated with pleasure and motivation, is one of the main drivers of our behavior. However, it's important to understand that not all dopamine is the same. There are the cheap sources which give us instant and quick gratification, like scrolling through social media or watching short viral videos. While this gives us a momentary sense of satisfaction, in the long run, these small bursts of dopamine leave us unmotivated and even frustrated, as they don't generate a true sense of achievement. Research from Stanford University shows that this immediate dopamine can impair our ability to focus on long-term goals. On the other hand, dopamine generated by achieving something meaningful, like completing a project, overcoming a fear, or reaching a personal goal, is much more powerful and long-lasting. The key here is to understand that the initial discomfort, the one we feel when starting something new or challenging, is essential for growth. Small victories along the way boost our motivation and build confidence. A study from the University of Chicago revealed that the more we challenge ourselves and expose ourselves to uncomfortable situations, the greater the dopamine release after success. This makes us want to keep going, creating a positive cycle of growth. So what can you do today to generate dopamine in a healthier way? Start by exposing yourself to small daily challenges. It could be something simple like reading for 20 minutes a day, practicing a new hobby, or taking that first step on a project you've been putting off for a while. By completing these small tasks, you begin to create a cycle of action and reward that is far more fulfilling than any quick fix of immediate pleasure. And by doing this, you'll be on the path to personal growth, something we'll dive into in more detail next. The journey of personal growth is rarely linear. In fact, it's often full of ups and downs, and that's completely normal. I've personally faced countless moments of insecurity and judgment throughout my journey. In medical school, for example, there are times when I feel like I don't measure up to expectations, even though I know I have the necessary skills. This feeling of inadequacy is common for anyone on the path to growth. But it's in these moments that we learn the most about ourselves and the importance of perseverance. What's most interesting is that as we continue on this journey, we start to realize that external approval becomes less and less important. When I first began creating content and sharing my ideas with the world, I received a lot of criticism and disapproving looks. However, every step I took, even in fear, reinforced my confidence in myself and what I believed in. The personal journey is often an internal battle against the fear of judgment and the insecurities we carry, but it's also the path that leads to deep and authentic fulfillment. The truth is, there's no magic formula. The secret lies in action, in constant movement. If you feel stuck or unsure about which path to take, the most important thing is to start, even if the first step is small. Don't let the fear of failure or the pressure to follow a certain pattern paralyze you. Your growth is unique and should not be compared to anyone else's. Instead of focusing on others' approval, focus on aligning your actions with what feels right for you. This pursuit of authenticity and continuous growth will not only bring you more confidence but also a deeper sense of fulfillment. And as we continue on this journey, the key lessons begin to solidify. Something we'll explore next. We've reached an essential point. Throughout this conversation, we've seen that the fear of judgment, imposter syndrome, and the crab bucket effect are common obstacles for anyone seeking to stand out. But more importantly, we've learned that discomfort is part of the growth process, and it needs to be faced head-on. What I want you to take away from this is that the key to success isn't in avoiding fear or criticism, but in embracing these challenges as opportunities to grow stronger. Every step you take toward your purpose, no matter how small, lays the foundation for something greater. Acting from higher emotions like empathy, love, and purpose keeps you motivated in a sustainable way. If you're only seeking external validation or quick pleasures, you end up falling into a cycle of frustration. But when your focus is on something bigger than yourself, whether it's helping others or working on a project that inspires you, your motivation renews itself each day. Science shows us that serving others, finding a purpose, and embracing discomfort create a growth cycle that's far more rewarding than any short-term gratification ever will be. Stop waiting for the perfect moment and start taking action. Don't let fear stop you from pursuing what truly matters. Remember, all the great leaders and successful people you admire faced fear and doubt too. The difference is, they chose to act, and so can you. Over time, you'll find that the initial discomfort transforms into confidence and personal growth. Now that you have the tools to stop worrying about what others think, it's time to put them into practice. Ask yourself, what can you do today to start living in alignment with what you want, instead of seeking approval from others? Every small change counts, and the first step is in your hands. So, what are you going to do now? Leave a comment with your thoughts, share what impacted you the most, and how you plan to apply it to your life. And if this content helped you in any way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep receiving insights like this. Share it with someone you believe could also benefit from this knowledge. Together we can create a community of freer, more authentic people. See you in the next video. There's a great recommendation for you in the description, so be sure to check it out.